The day the reflections vanished, the sky above Ilion City was perfectly calm, as though the clouds did not wish to bear witness. People leaned over sinks to rinse their faces and found the mirrors blank. Knives slipped during morning shaves when cheeks became featureless silver, and in bridal suites around the world veils trembled over brides whose own eyes no longer gazed back at them. Within a week, the phenomenon acquired a name: silver fever. Even though no one ran a temperature and there was no rash to trace, the condition was global, simultaneous and exhaustive. Every human reflection, whether from glass, water, metal, or the black screens of powered-down phones, simply failed to appear. Dogs still saw themselves in puddles. Ravens still argued with rooftop windows. Only people were excluded from the looking-glass world. Panic is seldom rational. When governments and laboratories failed to explain the erasure, pulpits and message boards did it for them. An old superstition resurfaced, polished by fear into dogma. A human without a reflection has lost the soul that produced it. The pandemic was rechristened the eclipse, and collective rhetoric pivoted from worry to shame. According to fiery pamphlets, every vanished image marked a spiritual debt. By contrast, anyone who still possessed a reflection, rare rumors spoke of such exceptions, must be carrying an extra soul, one stolen from the rest of humanity. They were labeled Kareen, fetches, doppelgangers, demons wearing human skins. In the quarter known as Rose Alley, a single-chair barber shop stood, with its facade boarded over. The sign above the door read Armand's and nothing more, for Armand had never bothered with the swirling stripe or painted razor common to the trade. What distinguished him in ordinary times was that he cut hair without mirrors. Years before the eclipse, he had removed the last looking glass after overhearing a teenage client moan that every angle of her face was a new imperfection. Armand clucked his tongue, lifted the mirror down, and nailed shut the brackets. "The best barbers work by feel," he declared, half truth and half creed. In the mirrorless months that followed the eclipse, Armand's shop became a refuge. Word of mouth sent customers his way. Gentlemen who hated the hollow gleam of their bathrooms, grandmothers who didn't want their grandchildren to see them shimmer and vanish above the sink. Armand's hands moved with the authority of someone sculpting memory rather than hair. A nick behind the ear signaled an old scar. A curl stubborn as a seashell meant the client frowned in sleep. Thinning at the temples told him they worried too much. When the haircut was finished, Armand would rub bay leaf tonic into the scalp, pronounce, "You look refreshed," and usher them out to a street that no longer offered proof. By winter's end, a squad of municipal clerics, priests rebranded as public health officers, clomped through Rose Alley with white scarves tied over their mouths. They tacked posters proclaiming, "If you can still see yourself, you are not yourself." In court reflected persons to the Temple of Glass. The city's new laws promised sanctuary for informants and mercy for the accused, neither of which materialized. What materialized were bonfires fed with mirrors and crackdowns on suspected double-souled citizens. Armand studied one of the posters, shame prickling like aftershave. He owned no mirror, yet he owned a pair of hands that trembled each time a customer cracked a joke about hunting demons. The barber had no fear of hardness. He stropped razors, split calluses with needles, swept up hair that resembled shed lives. What unnerved him was the eager ease with which frightened people rehearsed hatred. One rain-slick morning, a courier delivered a summons on city-crested stationery. "Mandatory soul audit," it read. Armand was ordered to report to the Temple of Glass for verification that he cast no reflection. Failure to comply, the document warned, would be considered an admission of demonic possession. Armand went, though the word possession made him grit his teeth. The temple occupied a repurposed opera house. Its marble foyer was now a maze of candlelight and polished shields. Citizens queued in nervous files, each required to step before a waist-high brass basin filled with black water. Most saw nothing but ceiling beams rippling in the surface and were issued a stamped parchment. "Soul in absence, penitence recommended." When Armand's turn came, the attendant, a young cleric with a drawn mouth, gestured him forward. The barber hovered above the water. The reflected ceiling swayed. He glimpsed a blurred shape that could have been his sleeve, or could have been nothing at all. The cleric declared the basin clear and waved him past. On the far side of the foyer, however, Armand noticed a group of burnished mirrors propped against velvet curtains. A little boy, perhaps 8, stood before them. In the glass, the child's outline glimmered, unmistakable, like a ghost stitched from moonlight. The watching clerics froze. Their law stated plainly, the reflected are demons. Yet they did not seize the boy. Instead, they looked around, every face begging someone else to begin the condemnation. It was easy to denounce an imaginary monster. It was harder to condemn a weeping child whose reflection flickered exactly as one's own once had. Armand stepped between them. He knelt palm up and asked the boy his name. "Javi," came the hitching reply. "Javi," the barber said, "I cut hair nearby. Would you like a trim?" The clerics snapped out of their stupor. One barked, "Step aside, citizen." "That is a double-souled entity." Armand did not move. He placed a firm hand on Javi's shoulder. "Who brought this child?" No one answered. The line shuffled forward, eyes averted as though the boy had materialized alone. Again the cleric commanded, "Stand away!" A guard loosened his baton. It occurred to Armand then that he possessed 2 assets no baton could answer: a reputation as a mirrorless barber and the fear of looking too closely. He squared his shoulders. "An error in your basin," he announced. "This child's reflection matches mine." He reached out and dragged the glass angle-wise. For an instant, candlelight dazzled. With practiced light tricks learned from arranging shop displays, Armand turned the mirror so it reflected only the boy's lower half. The clerics saw trouser legs twice over and, carried by suggestion, convinced themselves the doubling belonged to the barber. One shrugged, another exhaled, and the guard relatched his baton. They stamped Javi's parchment, soul in absence. Armand ushered the boy through the exit before anyone recalculated the illusion. Outside, sleet hissed in the gutters. "Where are your parents?" the barber asked. "Taken," Javi whispered. "They said the mirror lied, but I saw them. I still see me." His voice faltered. "Does that mean I stole someone's soul?" "No," Armand said, tasting bitterness at how easily the boy could imagine such guilt. "It means everyone is wrong about the nature of souls, and I intend to prove it." That night, Armand locked the barber shop and dismantled the back room he used for storage. Beneath floorboards lay objects he had hidden on the first week of the eclipse: 2 oval mirrors packed in straw, a pewter hand mirror scored by age, and a folder of newspaper clippings about disappearances long before silver fever. He salvaged a cracked phonograph horn as well. Its flared brass reminded him of a sunflower turned to metal, something that had listened so long it forgot how to bloom. The barber's plan was equal parts kindness and folly. Collect scientific evidence that the reflection pandemic was not spiritual theft but a physical phenomenon, and present it to the city council before the temple could authorize another purge. That taller minds had failed in the attempt did not deter him. Armand understood scissors and razors. He understood people. Where scientists chased theories in sterile labs, he would start with the stories, hidden under uneven bangs and behind gnawed-down nails. He recruited Javi as his assistant. The boy slept on a cot between shelves of pomade jars and, in exchange, helped conduct nightly interviews. Clients arriving by day returned after dusk to tell the barber their eclipse tales. Some described faint silhouettes reappearing during migraines. Others claimed they saw themselves in a spoon, but only when reciting childhood prayers. Armand noted each detail, tracing possible patterns: humidity, blood pressure, ambient light. He trimmed and shaved, asked follow-up questions, and served tea brewed from marigold and cardamom to keep volunteers talking. Through this improvised clinic, Armand discovered 3 crucial facts. 1. Reflections sometimes flared back into being, unpredictably but briefly. 2. The episodes clustered around sources of sound wind, chimes, bells, even music on old vinyl. 3. Each resurgence left the viewer feeling fatigued yet oddly calm, like the hush after sobbing. The barber's mind came alive with analogies. Sound was vibration, vibration was frequency. Frequency could modulate light. Perhaps whatever eclipse agent coated human skin dampened certain spectra, rendering bodies invisible to their own reflected wavelengths. If that blocker jittered loose when shaken by the right resonance, the image might momentarily return. He lacked the vocabulary of physics, so he framed the problem in terms of haircutting. A reflection was like a cowlick, too stubborn to tame with water, but surprised into obedience by a brief gust from the blow-dryer. Before disorient the enemy, and it reveals its shape. Armin scavenged the city for instruments. Pawn shops, gutted music halls, even the temple's trash heap supplied parts. He and Javi assembled a contraption in the shop's back room. Mirrors aligned at funny angles, copper wires stretched like violin strings. Empty aerosol cans whose nozzles had been replaced by tuning forks. At the center perched the brass phonograph horn. Javi named it the Echo Lantern. The first test subject was Javi himself. He sat before the lantern while Armand plucked the wires. A discordant twang filled the air. The tuning forks hummed, dust motes shivered. For 3 heartbeats nothing happened. Then a figure blossomed inside the largest mirror, startled eyes, tousled hair, collar askew. Javi gasped. The image mouthed the same gasp and held it. The boy reached out. His fingertips kissed the glass, and in that instant the reflection dissolved into a swirl of shadow and light, like smoke remembering it was once fire, but it had been enough. Both Barber and apprentice had seen proof. They repeated the experiment on volunteers who trusted Armin more than the temple. Out of 10 subjects, 4 produced short-lived reflections. Each reported the same gentle exhaustion. Armin refined the frequencies, tuning by ear like a luthier searching for moonlight in a chord. Success climbed to 7 out of 10. News of the experiments leaked. One morning Armin found a stone hurled through the storefront, jagged hole yawning in the wood. Chalk graffiti read, "Mirror Breeder." Yet more clients came, half afraid and half praying he would choose them. They came because hope, like rot, spreads from a single bruise until it sweetens everything. The temple came too. At twilight, a detachment of clerics marched down Rose Alley. Leading them was the same attendant who had stamped Armand's parchment. His scarf was embroidered now with reflective thread, authority glimmering where faces no longer did. "Armand of Rose Alley," he declared, "you stand accused of harboring demons, manufacturing forbidden reflections, and seducing citizens into heresy." The barber dried his hands on a towel, motioned for Javi to stay behind the counter, and stepped outside. Around them, neighbors peered from shutters. Some clutched the fresh cuts Armand had given them. Some had seen their own fleeting doubles in his lantern. "I harbor citizens," Armand replied. "You may enter and see." 2 clerics forced their way in while the attendant waited. Within minutes, they emerged carrying the Echo Lantern, seized by its wooden base. The brass horn clanked against the portals of angled glass. The attendant eyed the device with a mix of dread and temptation. "What is it?" "Proof that your theology is wrong," Armin said, "and that our souls have not left us. They are merely out of tune." The street held its breath. Somewhere a shutter creaked. Armin knew the next 10 seconds would decide whether the temple torched his shop or the city listened. He reached into the crate the clerics had not thought to search and removed a tuning fork. Striking it against the doorframe, he held the vibrating metal near the lantern's wires. A low thrum pooled like honey in the air. In the largest shard of glass, the attendant's face emerged, wan, lined, but unmistakably human. The clerics startled, nearly dropping the lantern. Gasps rippled along Rose Alley. Children scrambled for a glimpse. Adults pressed palms to mouths as though the truth might spill out faster than belief could swallow it. The reflection quivered, bled at the edges, vanished. Not 1 heartbeat later, the crowd erupted in cries. Not fear this time, but yearning, raw as a newborn scream. For months they had suppressed that yearning because longing for the impossible hurt too much. Now, for the first time since the eclipse, a civic official had witnessed what might be a cure. The attendant's voice was hoarse. "How?" "Sound," Armin replied, "and the courage to look." He gestured to the onlookers. "Hold your spoons, your kettle lids, any shine you have left. We are going to sing." It started as an uneven murmur. A woman hummed the lullaby her mother once combed her hair to. A baker patted floury hands on his apron and joined with a half-remembered hymn. Chords braided across doorways, warped but resonant, until the alley sounded like a cracked bell daring the world to break further. Mirrors flickered, soup ladles flashed with startled eyes, children saw themselves inside marbles, lovers saw themselves in each other's pupils. Images bloomed, failed, bloomed again. The strain left throats raw, but the loss was glorious. It tasted of effort, not despair. "What you hate," Armand told the attendant amid the roar, "is not a demon. It is the ache of what your own heart misses." The cleric sagged as though unstrung. He did not order arrests. Instead, he let the lantern rest on the cobblestones, fragile and humming. News traveled faster than doctrine. By dawn, politicians demanded demonstrations. Physicists demanded schematics. Theologians demanded new commandments. Armand gave them all scissors lessons first. He made ministers sweep hair, taught academics to fold warm towels, insisting that if they would speak for souls, they must learn to touch heads, gently. Workshops sprouted throughout Ilion. Echo-lanterns multiplied in basements and bell towers. People discovered that even pounding a drum or stomping a foot could call forth a ghostly self for the span of a blink. And that blink was enough to recall forgotten gentlenesses. How to adjust a collar, how to grin without waiting for confirmation. There were setbacks. Some zealots clung to demon rhetoric, burning musicians' homes. Some early adopters pushed the frequencies too far and triggered days-long migraines. Yet one cannot unsee oneself once seen. The movement endured, loosening fear like wine loosens words. Months later, during the Equinox Assembly in Ilion's Central Plaza, Armand stood beside Javi, who had grown 2 inches and cut his own hair now. A choir of thousands filled the square with a single sustained note, low as twilight. On every surface, fountain water, polished buttons, brazier shields, faces surfaced and held, not perfect, not steady, but present, a flicker of where the world had been and where it might go. Armand felt tears dampen his beard. He did not wipe them away. He wanted the wind to carry proof of salt, of pores, of life. Around him, strangers clasped shoulders, marveling at the line of continuity between flesh and apparition. No city law remained to tell them what that line meant, so they decided for themselves. Here we are, intact, not because the mirror says so, but because we can choose to meet the gaze offered there, however briefly, and in a mirrorless barber's pocket lay a battered tuning fork, quiet now, warmed by the thrum of thousands of reunited reflections singing over its silent teeth.